Hello and welcome to the Volleycast. I am your host, Joe Trinzi. And on the other line, back again is Scott Mooney. And joining us is also my buddy, John Grossman. How you guys doing, Scott and John?
Doing great.
Good.
Hey, good to see you again. A couple housekeeping items before we get started. We're recording this on Friday. It is Friday, right? Yeah, okay, great. It's Friday.
It is, yeah.
I think all of us, the days of the week has basically become irrelevant at this point because we're all just working from home. So who knows what day it is. But it is, we are recording this on Friday. So then we'll release it on Saturday morning. And we have the premium webinar with Alfie Reft tomorrow. Alfie Reft, Associate Head Coach at University of San Diego, former national team libero. So really fired up for that webinar. It's been sold out for a little while. But we will be putting that recording up online. So you can check out scoutvb.com in the shop there if you want to check that out. And next week's premium webinar with Dan Fisher, head coach at Pitt. I think it's got, as of this recording, it's got 3 or 4 openings left. So that will sell out in the next couple days. If you guys are excited to hear from Dan Fisher, sign up for that. Again, we keep these limited to 20 coaches so they can really be a dialogue and a conversation rather than just a presentation. They've been going really good, and I actually spoke to Fish this morning, and it was just an awesome conversation. I'm like really fired up for that webinar. He's got some really cool teaching concepts about teaching attackers to be more aggressive, and what that looks like from a statistical perspective, what that looks like from training perspective, from a mindset perspective, and it's just really cool. It's definitely a little contrast. I don't want to say him and I have disagreements on it, but he has a perspective that's a little bit different than I would say my formative volleyball background. So it's just really cool. So I really love learning from people that just approach things from a little bit of different angle. So I was just in the conversation we had this morning, I was like, oh wow, this is just awesome. I'm already learning stuff just in the preparation for these, which is really why I do these webinars. They're really just an excuse for me to pick the brain of coaches that I want to learn from and then get some of you all to finance that operation. So thank you all for participating. So that said, let's get into this podcast. So Scott and I had an awesome conversation kind of about the state of club volleyball and how some of just the logistical and financial effects are kind of affecting club volleyball coaches. We've been talking about that, but we wanted to get into some of like the volleyball end. So we're kind of doing a part 2. So Scott is the director of Cherry Hill Volleyball Club in Cherry Hill, New Jersey. And John, are you like the co-director? Would you be considered the technical director? Like, do you guys even
both.
have?
he's both. Co-director, technical advisor, yeah.
So we'll talk a little bit more basically just about what coaches in general, but this conversation more specific to club coaches, what they can be doing that's productive to help their players right now, what's not productive. And, John's a guy I've known for a long time. He's one of the smartest guys I know and just spends probably, let's be honest, way too much time thinking about how to make practices better. But it's certainly I benefit from those conversations. So let's just so John, I'll just kind of ask you, what can we be doing that's most productive with our players right now?
I think, from my point of view, I think it's really tough to be focused so much on the players. I besides doing some different kind of little pepper drills out back or making sure you're jogging or hitting the weight room, there's not much that we can do to directly influence how we're going to play volleyball. I think the biggest thing you can do is make yourself a better coach. We have a lot of time, hopefully. I know a lot of people are working from home, so they're putting 40 hours in, but you're not commuting, you're not doing a lot of other stuff. So I think
let's be honest, nobody working from home is working a full 40-hour work week right now. Let's be honest about that.
My wife seems to be, but maybe she's just lying to me to get some space. But yeah, I think trying to make yourself a better coach is what you should be focusing on. I think making sure that you have some good ways of bringing in new information and trying to digest it and taking some time. I think that's going to be the thing. And my guess is going to be your next question is, how are you doing that right now? And I think Twitter is a great place.
I like how John is now interviewing himself. This is amazing. Keep going.
We'll turn our video shares off.
I'll take a break, John. You get after it.
All right. So I think Twitter is a great place to go look for some information. And I think with all social media, you got to be really careful about the sources that you're going to, because there's a lot of really bad stuff out there. I think if you go to YouTube and just get setting drills, your kids are going to be running around with cones over their heads. But I think you can go find a lot of good people that are deep into research right now that are still releasing, papers that they're putting out there, or there's some good conversations that you can find that are happening in real time about that stuff.
Are you trying to suggest that the AVCA video tip of the week is not all that coaches need to become a better coach?
I think you can go find a interview where Carl McGowan puts it a little bit better than I would about the AVCA stuff.
That's probably a fair assumption. So I don't know. Give us like a couple off the top of your head Twitter handles that coaches can start going down this rabbit hole.
All right. Well, I think we can start with Rob Gray. He does a great podcast, Perception in Action, which if you got some time now, what you do, he's got about 200 episodes up that are podcasts, but he puts out a lot of data on Twitter that is applicable. And then it depends on which way you want to go with what you're doing. Rise Volleyball, a club out in Idaho, is their club director is doing a lot of stuff with maybe how to teach volleyball a little bit differently, very constraints based as opposed to block training, a lot of drills and games to try and teach the ideas. And he puts out some good things there that I think some people might find interest in. And then Mark Bennett out in England has podcasts. It's focused more on soccer, but it's very constraints-based. Europe is leading the way, or at least soccer clubs in Europe are leading the way on this new type of thinking, constraints-based learning. And he has a lot of podcasts, but I think if you go and you look at both Rise Volleyball and Mark Bennett stuff, you can start picking up the conversations with people that are he's having, and that they're good little rabbit holes to start going down or to start following those people. And you can start building out a little bit of a network there on your Twitter.
Awesome. So we'll link to those couple of things in the show notes, and I don't know, we'll tweet them from the Volleycast Twitter. So those are some really good things. I would definitely second. Actually, I haven't been following Rise Volleyball Club, so now I'm just really intrigued. Rise Volleyball, if you're listening, coming for you. Want to learn what you guys are putting out there. But I'll definitely. I've been following Rob Gray. I've been following Rob Gray for a while. Perception Action podcast is really good. One thing I like about his stuff is he does a pretty good job putting it in bite-sized stuff that you can kind of chew off. So it's very nerdy, very science-based, but he puts it in 5 to 15-minute chunks. And I think he does a pretty good job of describing a study or describing a piece of research and correlating it to, okay, well, this is how sport coaches might practice it. He tends to come from a baseball. He's worked a lot on the baseball side, but a lot of it seems pretty doable to feel like how it might relate to volleyball. So, Scott, what are you doing to make yourself a better coach?
So I'm going to take the optimistic angle here and say that maybe our players can get like a tiny bit better. I agree with John. I think that mainly what we're doing is the administrative side, or the coaching side, where I'm sending out newsletters. We're talking. We're having our end of season meetings with our coaches. We're trying to kind of recap our season and figure out what we can do better next year. So we're going through all those things. But we did send out a newsletter yesterday for our players, and Joe and I we kind of discussed off camera or off recording, I guess, last time about what you can do for players. And I think, it makes sense to look at it like a spectrum, where if you're on this side and you're playing for Team USA, or in Joe's case, Team Canada, I don't know that passing against a wall for 30 minutes a day is going to help them very much. And then on this side, if you take like maybe our 11 and unders, or my daughter who's never played volleyball, she's 7 years old, and she wants to do some self-passing, then maybe that's okay. So really my biggest advice to all of our players was, hey, get a net up in your backyard. And if you don't have someone in your family that can play with you, teach your mom or dad or someone to play. And maybe you can do a little self-toss and work on your hand contacts. Maybe you can, play a little bit of 1v1 or 2v2 if you can get that together in your family. Maybe your parents can toss you some balls and you can spike them. Like, I don't know. And is the transfer great? No, it's not going to be great. I think that the more realistic these things are, the better they are. And I think John, as our technical advisor, constantly is like trying to rein me in when I'm trying to do weird stuff and telling me, nope, got to make it real. But I do think that, hey, look, if you got kids out there who want to go play, yeah, if it makes you 1% better, hey, you got the time, right? So I think that's the volleyball side. But for me, really, with my high school team and even with the club now, I'm focused more on the high school girls and saying, what can you do? And the answer is come back in really good shape. I think that's something you got to control what you can control. We can't control our gym space right now. We're not going to be there. We're not going to be playing volleyball. And, I think to be a great high-level volleyball player at an older age group, you have to play 6v6 at a high level. That's what you need. We can't do that. So at least, hey, when you come back in the gym, make sure you're in great shape. You can work out at home. It doesn't mean that, hey, maybe you don't have the weight room equipment you always have. So you're not maybe doing heavy deadlifts, for example, or something like that. But you can do some weighted jumps. You can go out and run uphill sprints. There's things you can do, and you can really manage your nutrition, right? And I think that's something that John helped us put together for our club, was how we're managing nutrition for our older athletes. We're thinking grade 9 and above. We don't really do too much strength and conditioning with our kids who are grade 8 and below, obviously. So I think that's something you can do, and I think that's not, is it great? No. Is it as good as club practice? Absolutely not. But I think, hey, maybe incremental gains over this period are worth something, and I think that's kind of where we're looking at it, is like, hey, be in great shape, eat right, manage your sleep, all that good stuff. You have the time right now. And then if you can get a little volleyball in, that's fantastic. And if you can't, we're not pushing it. I think that's, it is what it is. I guess, Joe, I should ask you and John, you guys saw the first week that we closed, everything on Instagram, everything on Twitter was like, here's 50 volleyball things you can do at home right now. And since then, I don't see it. I'm not seeing that come out as much.
If there's
how many
one
ways
thing,
can you pass yourself off a wall?
I'll give you guys a social media. My wife shows this one to me. It's called Influencers in the Wild. I think it's an Instagram account. Influencers in the Wild. What happened is all the influencers are no longer able to be in the wild. They're caged up. So the influencers are taking full advantage of showing, 50 exercise. The amount of home exercise YouTube,
it's unbelievable.
It's really quite special. And the same thing with volleyball. So I have some thoughts on why these things may be productive. But John, tell us why they're not productive, because I can tell you're itching to do that.
Yeah, we need to have some kind of reading component off of everything that we do, except for maybe serving. I would say that you could probably get away with serving against an empty net and get better at it. But after that, everything's an open loop skill, meaning we don't control how the ball is getting to us, and we need to be able to make a read. If you make a read off how your setter setting, if you're passing off of what the serve looks like, spiking, you got to read your setter, you got to read the blockers. There's a lot of stuff that's going on there, and without that reading component, you're just not going to get a transfer. So I think that becomes, the very tough part about volleyball and social distancing is you need to have somebody doing something with you to make it work better. And the more realistic, the better the transfer is going to be, and the more you're going to get better from it. So that's the tough part. I would agree with Scott. Some 1-on-0 drills wouldn't be bad for 11s, 10s, 9s, 12s. And we do some of that training in our gym when we do have a court. But you take a 17-year-old kid who's been playing volleyball for 10 years, you have them pass against the wall. They're either not going to be enthused by it, or they're not going to really be getting much out of it. So that's what's making this so tough these days.
Yeah, I think clearly you hit the nail on the head there. There's little to no transfer. Something that I think is, I don't want to say the notion of transfer is overrated, because I think in the general coaching population, it's extremely underrated. And I think that sometimes I think it's overrated because the bubble that I tend to exist in is coaches that are like very hyper aware of transfer. this idea of, okay, what we're doing in practice has to be, it has to transfer, it has to be aligned and all of that. But the angle, so I think that the general population of coaches vastly underrates and doesn't think as clearly, as critical as they could about how their drills are transferring to the game. But I think that there is a small section of activities or just general life patterns that I see players who really get good at volleyball do. I think that almost all players who get really good at volleyball spent some amount of time, for the lack of a better term, like doing it by themselves. I just see that with so many players who became good. And to be honest, I don't think that amount of time was their whole life or anything like that. But I think that there's some value to doing some of these, I don't even want to call them like home volleyball workouts, but just I just see it. So I don't know if it's a correlation, not causation kind of thing. Like those players ended up being great players because they loved volleyball so much that they would go out into their backyard and play volleyball. And that was a more of a symptom and not the cause of it. So I think that's possible. I also think that there's some value to, I don't know, the meditative quality of trying to do something by yourself. I see all players, we know all these sorts of things about serving, how if I want to get good at serving and I want to maximize transfer, I need to serve at passers. I need to serve in a game-like situation. I need to serve and then go and play another volleyball skill so that I have to re-retrieve the serving motor program, although it's not really a motor program anymore. We don't use the language anymore, but or it's not that we don't use language. It's not descriptively accurate of what happens in the brain, but then we need to re-retrieve this solution from our short-term memory again. So we need to alternate the skills, all that stuff. But I see that all players who become good at all sports, I think like really elite, they just want some time by themselves to go and serve by themselves or hit off the tee or do this or do that. And I think that there's effectively zero transfer to actual volleyball effectiveness. But I think there's something about the mentality of just it's space to think about the game. So from a coaching perspective, I hesitate to overprescribe it because then I think that they're trying to do your coaching home skills workout, and not this self-directed meditation on volleyball or imagining. I can use like my wife, for example, because I know her story obviously very well, but this echoes a lot of what I heard from national team players and professional players. Is she would say, a couple of the summers, like maybe between when she was in like 6th and 7th grade or 7th and 8th grade, like something like that, couple of those summers, she would just sort of go out and serve the ball up on the roof, and it would trickle down and she would bump it to herself and then set it and then hit it up, and she would do all this. And I've seen that story a lot from players who get there. And I think that I don't think that much of that skill was transferring to the court. But what I think is like she's out there doing that and imagining that she would become a professional volleyball player someday. She has her like 8th grade yearbook or something like that. And it was like, what are you going to be when you grow up? And she said, I'm going to be a professional volleyball player. And then she did end up becoming a professional volleyball player. And, I can think about the same thing in my life. And I actually think about it more from the coaching perspective, and probably you guys can relate to this. I spend a lot of time thinking about coaching. And I don't know if you have to get better at coaching by coaching. So just sitting around thinking about coaching doesn't make you better in and of itself, but there's some sort of second or third order effects there. So I don't know how to exactly say this, because as a coach, you can't prescribe it. You can't prescribe like bumping the ball to yourself while imagining playing volleyball for Stanford or something like that. You can't like prescribe that, but I think that it's like really invaluable. So like some percentage of players right now will see a huge benefit. I actually think some percentage of volleyball players out there, this imposed restriction from volleyball will actually make them much better, because there's some I think for most players, it's going to harm them. No doubt, or not harm, maybe not actively harm, but like limit development.
Sure.
But I actually think for some percentage of volleyball players, they will look back in 10 years or 7 years and see this as a catalytic moment in their career where they were cooped up inside or in their backyard or in their apartment, bumping to themselves or sitting against the wall and like itching and imagining what they would be like when they go back and to play for their high school team or this or that, and like come out of it. So like, I don't even know, like, I mean, I can make that claim and there's like zero scientific research, which is the great thing about it, because you
it's the best kind of claims. Yeah.
Yeah. You can't prove me wrong. So clearly I'm right. But I don't know. There's something about that. And I just think as coaches, we can maybe facilitate some things like that. We can definitely restrict it. We can definitely overprescribe and mess it up. But maybe there's some sort of environment and there's some sort of inspiration that we can help get going.
I'd be curious to survey, this summer or something, or maybe the fall, whenever we get back, which, I think is probably going to be in the gym. I think it's going to be in the fall. I think maybe we have some outdoor summer stuff.
Yep.
But I'd be curious to kind of like, day one back, grab all the parents and be like, hey, what was little so-and-so doing, on her spare time? Did she play any volleyball or whatever? And then maybe get like a little sample size here of which kids, because we'll see it, right? We know where they finished, right? And we'll see it. Like, I'd be curious to see if some kid makes a jump in these 3 months, where you're like, wait, why did you get better? Now, some of them are growing, some of them are just getting physically bigger and stronger and whatever. But it would be kind of curious to maybe even look at like the liberos, for example, or something. Like, who got better? Why did they get better? Yep. It'd be curiosity for sure.
John, the answer, you have to in some way answer yes to this question, because I'm being paid by some people to do it right now. But is there value in somehow training, reading the game or something by studying video? Or for example, I'm going to watch a video of hitters and I'm going to try to, as I'm watching the video, anticipate whether they're hitting or tipping. And somehow that's going to, maybe I roll the tape and I pause right before they're about to spike the ball. And I try to predict where they're going to spike it or something like that. And is there some value in me as a defender just doing that? And is there some measure of transfer for me improving my reading? And as I said, that you have to answer yes, because right now some people are paying me to do this. So let's not tell them that I'm charging them for a service that's not helping them. Okay, go. Tell me why I'm ripping people off.
No, I think there is a lot to watching video. I think that the studies show that the transfer is small. Off the top of my head, and I'm going to give you an anecdotal story about this, but again, some transfer is better than no transfer. Yep. Sitting on your couch and watching nothing is not as good as watching people play the game. And then if you have some sort of training with it, that makes it even better. And while I say the story or the studies don't show a high amount of transfer, anecdotally, I think a lot of people in the United States, especially guys, can go out there and play basketball and not make a fool of themselves, even though they didn't all play basketball in high school. But they understand what a pick and roll is, and they kind of understand some stuff going on. And that's because we watch so much NBA basketball. And I think one of the big things that our kids could do is just watch volleyball games, bringing it back into the club side. There's tons of stuff, FIVB, find all the Big Ten matches on YouTube. You could go watch some volleyball and, kind of see how people play. And I think that's an underused kind of tool. But again, I think it has to be more intrinsic than, hey, you have to watch 30 minutes of volleyball every day. So that's not going to work out well. But, having some conversations with your players and, hey, I really love watching Kelsey Robinson pass. I think she does such a great job. You should watch her and tell me what you think about it, and maybe try and spur some conversations, and maybe one or two of the kids will be like, oh, wow, this was really fun, like watching this. And that would get them better. So, that's some thoughts there.
I think that's a good insight. And again, I'll kind of like flag this notion of transfer, because I'm pretty confident that there's, as you say, at best, low transfer, between watching a defender and then if I just did that for half hour 2 times a week for 4 weeks, and then you came back and tested me on how many digs I would get. I would say essentially to a Ferk's approximation, 0 more. However, I think that I don't think it helps the how, because the how has to be learned by doing. But I think it can open your eyes to some of the what's. So what I mean by this is, for example, I ran a session with some setters the other day. Wally's announcing himself.
Guest appearance there.
So I ran a session with some setters, and one of the kind of things that I said at the end of that, as we're wrapping up, hey, tell me one thing that you took away when you go back to your team, one thing that you can try. And several of the setters basically said something like, John, get back here. Can you still hear me, John? Okay. So basically what I'm saying is, so we did the session, and then, we wrapped up the session, and what I always try to do is, okay, tell me one thing that you took away from here that you can do in your next practice. And like several of the setters basically said something like, okay, I got to ask my hitter if the set was too high or too low. I got to talk to my middle about whether the set was too high or too low. And the way they said it was in this sort of way that they had never thought about doing that before. Mm. They had never really thought, like, these are high school setters, and just, like a lot of high school setters, like their knowledge for the game is just not developed. They haven't done it a whole lot yet. And it was kind of just this notion of, and what we were watching is like the timing of the middle and then the height of the set and how that all went down. And I could just tell that like a lot of these setters had never really thought that the height of my set has to be synced up with how far along the middle hitter is in their approach. They just never really thought of that as an important idea. And then when we were watching, like some collegiate teams do it well with some different tempo, and it was okay, yeah, I see that is an important thing, and I see it being done well. So now when I get back to practice, I'm not going to be any better at it right now, but now I understand that this is something I should practice. So it gives them a little bit of the what. So that's what I think some of this, and I think, John, that's what you're sort of alluding to, is the fact that I have never played soccer in my life, but I've watched enough soccer to understand that, like, we try to kick it in the goal, and there's some sort of strategy where, like, one guy has the ball, the other guy runs down the field and, like, tries to find an open space, and I kick the ball into that open space, and then he runs it, and there's crossing plays and these, like, I'm sure, like, I'm total novice, but I would have a somewhat idea, like more than if I had never watched soccer before and was trying to invent this all on my own. I could be like, oh, these guys who are really good, they tried this sort of play. So when I get out there, I could probably maybe try that play. So it would give me the what to practice. So that's what I see as some of the value.
I think kind of piggybacking on that, just when you're a young player, your goal is to jump and hit. And then you get a little bit older and we try and hit the ball into the court. We don't want to make errors. But then when we start to take that next step, hey, we're difference between a good Division I recruit and a mediocre or whatever is the coaches are looking for the players that are hammering balls. And that intention is very important. It's not just a perception and action loop. It's an intention, perception, and action loop. And when you're trying to take that next step, you're not trying to not make errors. You're trying to get kills. You're trying to score points. And watching, the Olympic level players play or very good Division I, you'll see these, big girls hitting the ball as hard as they can. And sometimes they get blocked. And watching how they react to getting blocked and watch how your 16-year-old outside reacts to getting blocked. It's a very different mentality. And I think that's something that you can learn a lot from watching the higher level performers do stuff too.
Yeah. If you're a high school player and then you go pull up some video of Wisconsin volleyball playing this year in the Final Four, and you watch, that's how Tiffany Clark plays defense. I'm expected to throw my body around the court after every single ball, and whether it hits my arms or my shoulder or my knee, I go after it all. Oh, okay, that's hard to invent. Like if you've only seen other 8th graders play volleyball, you would never get to even have the idea that some of those things is possible. You know?
Yeah. So I think you guys are both saying it's more about awareness, right? Just being aware of the things that could or should be going on the court. You know, defensively, like, hey, just the fact that you should actually look at the hitter first, right? You know, I think a lot of kids, they just watch the ball. You know, we see it, right? They go like this, and you know, the ball's hit, and then everyone's surprised, right, or tips. Yes. And I think just the awareness of like, oh wait, you know, you can actually be doing something here.
Yeah.
What do you guys think about film, like watching yourself on film?
John?
Yeah, I think that's very good. You know, we use a lot of the iPads on video delay. So I don't think there's as much of a different or as much of a surprise factor, I'll call it, you know, but when you, for sure you can, when you bring up video to players and you sit down with them after a match and, hey, you know, if you're using Huddle, like Scott, I was helping you that one year, we had Huddle, bring Barrow in, sit down with her, and she'd be like, oh my God, I can't believe I did that. Why do I look like that? Why am I doing that? And you're like, yeah, you know, I don't know either. That's not what it looks like in the gym, but we got to, you know, making them aware of what's going on.
Yeah.
Really goes a long way. So I think the more video you can use for a player, the better. And the one small tip that I have is making it more of them wanting to look at the video. So that's been shown that if they have given the choice to use the video, they'll get more results out of using the video. So giving them the option, hey, you want to look at some you know, digs from our match last night or from the last couple of matches we played, or even when you set up the iPad, hey, you know, like you can go use this if you want. You know, this is how you work it. This is how you change it. The more you can put them into using it or they're controlling it, the more results they're going to get. Some players will want to watch themselves do something really well. Some players will want to watch themselves do things not well. And if you go the opposite direction, they're not going to get as much out of it. So letting them control as much as possible helps get the most out of that time.
Yeah, you know, it's kind of an interesting thing. I think this is something that this is just going back a little bit. Volleyball practice in general, or volleyball, the way it's played, just in general, suffers from. I think players could stand to watch more good players play than they do. You know, we talked about transfer. You know, we could just study players playing volleyball in general and show that they don't really get all that much better on average, even when they're practicing volleyball, even when they're doing things that look reasonably game-like or anything like that. And I think that part of it is a lot of players just don't know what good volleyball looks like, you know, and that's one of the hardest things about volleyball. Volleyball players, as a general class of people, don't watch much volleyball, actually. Yeah. It's a little easier now. It's been hard to watch volleyball. Your average high school kid, in my experience, has never watched a full set of even collegiate volleyball on TV. I think that I would say on average. In my experience going to camps, it's maybe 20%, maybe 1 out of 5, maybe even as high as 1 out of 3 kids. If you just take a whole group and say, hey, who here watched one of the matches from the NCAA tournament? Who here, hey, tell me who won the NCAA tournament. You might only have 2 kids on a team of 12 who know who won the national championship this past year. Yeah. I would say that if you look at a sport like football, the answer to that would be almost 100%. They would all know who won the Super Bowl. You know, or a basketball team. If you want, hey, who won the NBA championship? You know, like who, you know, all that stuff. They wouldn't know all that. And there's a lot of value. Like there's a lot of volleyball players who could get better if they just, if they turned on USA playing China and they just tried to do what those players are doing rather than listen to their dumbass coach's technique and just say, hey, I want to play like Kelsey Robinson. Not even paying attention to what, you know, there's a lot of high school basketball players who get better despite their coaches because they just watch. I don't even know who's good in basketball anymore. Kobe.
Too soon.
Too soon. Yeah, too soon.
Yeah, sorry, that was awkward. We'll edit that one out. That's Kobe is honestly, I just said that reflexively, like, because that's been everybody says it. Right? Kobe, yeah. You know what I mean? It's like, I feel like we can still say Kobe in his own.
Go Giannis, LeBron,
yeah. I mean,
shooter, Curry.
I mean, look, Steve Nash was doing all these not like he invented it, but he was like, Steve Nash has been jumping off his right foot to do a right-handed layup before every high school coach said that's bad fundamentals and all this. And now people are teaching that as part of the game, but kids were experimenting with that stuff, So I think that players in general could stand to watch a little more volleyball and listen to their coaches less.
Yeah, I mean, it's exponentially easier now, right? Because we have the Big Ten network. We have ESPN. Actually, if you go on ESPN, the app, you can go and find like a lot of volleyball games. I know some of them are under ESPN Plus, but you can go under, and just find a lot of replays and stuff. So it's pretty easy. And of course, YouTube, right? That's like the great equalizer. I think the reason that we don't see it as much is because, well, I'll give you an example. So we're in South Jersey, which is, I know, a volleyball hotbed, right? And,
Big time.
But that's where John and I are. And so I started playing volleyball in 1995 or 6, I guess it was. And my school had only had a program, I think, for 2 or 3 years before that. So I just turned 40. So that means if you're 42 or 43, if you're older than that, you did not play volleyball in South Jersey. And, people do tend to come back to where they're from. And, so there's a lot of people. So I think you just don't have that culture here where anybody has access or thinks to even turn it on when their kids are growing up. The majority of the girls, we don't have middle school programs. So the majority of the girls that are starting volleyball are starting at Cherry Hill East anyway, or starting in 9th grade, having never played before.
Yep.
And so they're certainly not watching it at home. They don't even know that they want to do it yet. They don't know it exists. So I think we're seeing a nice turn now where I'm starting to see, like, I actually had a guy who, was on one of our state championship teams in high school. And his 2 daughters are now in our youth program. And we're starting to see that now a little bit, where some people who have volleyball experience and are playing at home are coming back into the programs. But you got a pretty small window, and it's growing, and eventually it'll be ubiquitous. But I do think that kids are starting to watch a little bit more. And I do think you have to throw stuff at them like YouTube videos. I think asking them to find the Big Ten network and watch a game on like a random Wednesday, I don't know if any of them like care or know how to do that. But I think if you could tell them to follow 3 Instagram, feeds and watch a YouTube clip or highlight video or whatever, like, hey, watch best defensive plays of the FIVB tournament. It's a 10-minute video and it's super exciting.
Yeah, it's awesome.
I don't know do that,
Yeah. What some of the most productive things that I've started doing at camps that I run is I just throw on a really good volleyball match at lunch, and I throw on a video of BYU winning because it's contractually obligated in our gold medal square. We have to make BYU look good. But no, I throw on a volleyball at lunch, and the kids half of them don't pay attention and half of them do, and stuff like that. So I think if there's one good conclusion, that kids can just watch some really good volleyball while they're hanging out. And maybe if there's a few things that there's a structure and a practice or something like that behind it, okay, maybe there's some, John, as you said, maybe there's a little bit of net transfer, and that's better than no transfer. But I think the main thing is if they can just watch volleyball and get some inspiration.
Yeah. And if you like the anecdotal stuff, sometimes I'll put on a 5-minute clip of best digs right before we play sixes or something like that at a practice. Yep. And man, the kids get fired up, and it's completely anecdotal, and I'm sure there's no scientific background to that. But they get excited, and to my eyes, it seems like they play a little bit harder. So
yeah, a lot of high-level programs do something like that. Most notably, I believe Nebraska. I think they call it like High Five or Top Five or something like that. They watch their best plays from the previous practice before they start a practice, and it's something that they've been doing for a while, I believe. At least last time I talked to Kayla. So yeah, there's some really good programs benefiting from it too. We're coming up on time, so this was longer than we expected to go, but it was an awesome conversation. And thanks, you guys, for joining us, and thanks to everybody for listening to the Volleycast.
All right. Thanks a lot, guys. Thanks for having me.
Take care.